On the 30th of January 2024, news broke out that one of the most acclaimed shooter games of the decade could no longer be sold on Steam. This is a game that stood out in a time where Modern Warfare 3 and Battlefield 3 was dominating the gaming space. It was also a game where the heart was the storytelling and the narrative, and not the action at display. And now, 12 years later, it suddenly becomes delisted on Steam, and if you do not already own the game, you can no longer get it. Today we're going to be talking about Spec Ops: The Line. Spec Ops: The Line was a third-person shooter game developed by Jaeger Development and published by 2K Games. It was released on PC, PlayStation and Xbox in June of 2012. The game was set in Dubai, in the United Arab Emirates, which had been devastated by massive sandstorms. The player takes on the role of Delta Force Captain Martin Walker, that is leading a three-man recon team tasked with tracking down a signal from within the city, rescuing survivors and locating Colonel John Conrad, the leader of the United States 33rd Battalion, who went missing trying to evacuate Dubai. As the game progresses, Walker and his team uncovers the unsettling truth about what happened in Dubai, and they find themselves faced with inhumane dilemmas and situations. Captain Walker and the team slowly begins to fall apart and start to question their own sanity as they experience increasingly disturbing choices. In 2012, Spec Ops: The Line was met with critical acclaim for the story, which explores the psychological effects of war. Today, the game has overwhelmingly positive reviews on Steam. The game took a lot of inspiration from the movie Apocalypse Now and Heart of Darkness, which I think was very noticeable in the narrative itself. However, the game also received a lot of criticism for the violence depicted, which some of the reviewers back then found to be very excessive.
Jesus, what the fuck did you do, Walker?
But overall, Spec Ops: The Line was in many ways a thought-provoking and disturbing game that definitely lingered with me for a while after I finished playing it. So when I heard it was delisted, I immediately ran to my computer and reinstalled it and played the game all over again. So I replayed the entire campaign. And looking back at it now, 12 years later, it becomes apparent to me that the games industry just don't make games like these anymore. At least they're not doing it in the mainstream. I feel like the narrative-heavy shooter games are virtually non-existent, and there is no willingness to risk something like the story that Spec Ops: The Line has. If it's not a live service attached to it, it's not likely to be made at all. And I'm not the first person to see that the live service model has almost completely wiped out the story-driven and campaign-heavy games of old. In both Battlefield and Call of Duty, this is the clearest to me. Two franchises that once had incredible stories as their main selling point has turned to where the live service is the main focus, and we're lucky if we get a story campaign attached to it. And if we do, it's short and not really the most exciting of experiences. Now, Spec Ops: The Line has some great features, and it is at its core a cover shooter like Rainbow Six Vegas or Gears of War. It has a mechanic to command your squad, there is environmental destruction where you can use the environment to your advantage. For instance, you can shoot out glass that will make sand pour into an area, taking out many enemies. And there's a sandstorm mechanic that greatly reduces visibility, and overall some decent gunplay sprinkled on top of it. And over the course of a few hours, it's really easy to master, and it can become a bit generic. But it's almost like they made the game like that on purpose. I mean, it's like they're luring you in, making you think this is just a generic shooter game, when in fact it's so much more than that. But the game had its fair share of controversy. But what was it? What was the controversy? What was up with that? So let's talk about some of the things that happens in the game. What is the most controversial scene you remember from any AAA game that you played? Is it Modern Warfare 2 No Russian? Was it the GTA 5 torture scene? Okay. A quick spoiler warning, if you haven't played Spec Ops: The Line, maybe turn off the volume while the sign is up, or don't, but here we go. You unintentionally murder hundreds of civilians, including children, with white phosphorus. You also have to choose between saving civilians about to be executed and trying to save a CIA operative. And if that was not enough, you will at one point have to choose if you want to mow down a crowd of civilians in a refugee camp in retaliations of them hanging your friend. We can safely say that this game fucks with your head and puts you as the player in some really uncomfortable situations. As the story slowly develops into more of a PTSD nightmare towards the end, as the plot twist hits and Walker is faced with trying to justify all of the horrible things he is responsible for, or what you as a player is responsible for. So what happened to Spec Ops: The Line? Was it because of the mentioned content that it got removed? No, actually not at all. There are multiple scenes in Spec Ops where there is music that plays in the environment during combat. Often it's used to make it seem more like an action movie. The characters are even commenting on it during the gunfights. But this music was copyrighted music that was licensed for the game, and it's these licenses that has run out, meaning that they are not allowed to sell the game as long as there is copyrighted material belonging to these artists in the game. And we don't know if 2K Games will ever renew these licenses, or if the game will remain delisted forever. But that's why you can't play this game anymore, unless you own it from before the 30th of January. And that's the conclusion of the story of Spec Ops: The Line, at least so far. But installing and replaying this old gem made me think about the current landscape we have in gaming today, and how I sometimes miss when games like this could be made, where developers could take a chance on a story-driven narrative, a story-driven game. But that's all from me. My name is Seb, and if you enjoyed this little video, please leave a comment, a like, and consider subscribing to the channel. And to all my YouTube members, a big thank you for supporting me, and from me to you, stay safe. I'll see you in the next one.